Welcome. Happy Mother's Day, first off, to all the moms out there. I'd like to say happy, big, big, big happy Mother's Day. And before we get into any science today, I really need to say that I really want to say something that I think matters more than actually any of the science that we're going to go over today. And I need you to hear me, okay? Your neurodivergent diagnosis, your gut protocol, your healing journey, none of it should become another way that you're hard on yourself. Okay. I'm not here to hand you another checklist to fail at. Um, we're here to finally understand what's actually happening in our body, right? Understand, and to be able to move forward and do something about it. Not perfection, understanding. Okay. Healing is not linear. Okay. It's like this, right? But this is about understanding. The first step is understanding and then not expecting us to be perfect. Okay. Because none of us are. Even though I like to think I am, I'm not. Okay. All right. So let's review a little bit about what we talked about this week. In the articles, I covered the estrobolome. I want to come back to that because I do think that it's really powerful and it's a different kind of vibe reading it and then actually hearing me walk through it. I think it's two different experiences. So, as I told you, the estrobolome is a community of gut bacteria that, what does it do? It basically recycles, clears up that estrogen and gets it rid of it, takes it out of our body. Okay. Actual gut bacteria do this. Okay. They actually do it. It's a metabolic job. And then these gut bacteria produce an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. Okay. Fancy word, beta glucuronidase. When your microbiome, okay, is balanced, and listen, I like to say that the microbiome is a lot like a rainforest. It needs a lot of different species of trees, bacteria, okay? And it also needs a lot of trees, okay? And the gut is the same as a rainforest. It needs a lot of different species of bacteria and it needs a lot of bacteria, period. Okay. So when this microbiome or our rainforest has enough species and has enough diversity of the species and enough species, then everything is great, right? We process the estrogen, boom, 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 we get rid of it. But when the gut microbiome is dysbiotic, or think of it this way, you don't have enough species, or maybe you have a whole bunch of species, but not enough trees, right? You have 17 species, but only 17 trees, right? Any one of those combinations, guess what happens? That microbiome, and we call that dysbiosis, right? Or part of that, it can reactivate that estrogen and send it back into our system. Okay. And guess what? That recycled estrogen, in this sense, recycling is not a good thing. That recycled estrogen is inflammatory, okay? It's not the same as the estrogen that your ovaries make, okay? It drives very specific things. Bloating, worsening PMS or PMDD, breast tenderness, brain fog, all of these really, really inflammatory things. It can aid to having more anxiety or our ADHD symptoms feeling worse, okay? And guess what? A lot of times no one's connecting that back to the gut. For a lot of doctors, if you even ask them, they don't even know what an estrobolome is, okay? They don't even know what an estrobolome is. So really important that we understand this. And here's another part that's really important for our neurodivergence specifically is, guess what? The things that affect the gut here are things that really are part of our everyday system as neurodivergent women. And that is a huge piece of this. And that's why it's really important that we understand the gut and gut health, right? So chronic stress. Raise your hand if you have chronic stress in the room, right? Most of us have lived this way since childhood, right? Once we started masking as teenagers and all of these things, building these hierarchies of things that we are trying to overcome. Guess what? Chronic stress raises cortisol. Sustained cortisol, guess what it does? It increases gut permeability and shifts that microbiome composition. So that species composition of what's in our rainforest, it's chronic stress is changing that. Guess what else does? Stimulant medications, okay? Stimulant medications can actually reduce the diversity of the microbiome. Then add in some of us with our neurodivergence, some of us do have sensory food restrictions, right? This is a really real thing. And I want to be very explicit here. Textured versions And safe foods are real and valid. They are not flaws. They're not an issue, but they can reduce the amount of certain things that we need to keep the gut healthy. So, depending on what your aversion is, you may be getting less fiber than we want. It's not a problem, but we have to plan for it. Right? It's not that your aversions are a problem that we can't overcome. We can, but we have to know what they are, and then we have to make sure that you're getting all of the rest of the stuff around that. Okay. Um, this is actually also why GI comorbidities are far more common in neurodivergent women, in neurodivergence in general, men too, um, than the normal population, right? Because we spend a lot of time in fight or flight. Okay. We do. So the estrobolome is a huge piece of that, right? The way we live our lives is a huge piece of that. Okay, real talk here for a second. So now that we know, and most of us actually probably do know that the gut is really important, or I would say if you're just learning about the gut, I would guess after treating hundreds and hundreds of neurodivergent women that you knew and you've known for quite a long time that something is off with your gut. Sit with that for a second. Like, I think you probably have known. But there are three things that I want every single neurodivergent woman to walk away knowing about your gut. Okay. Okay. Are you ready? Number one, your nervous system and your gut are the same system. Okay. There is a gut brain axis that is the same system. The gut has its own nervous system. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it contains more neurons than your spinal cord, right? Your gut and your brain are a two-way conversation, right? They have walkie talkies, right? And for us, for neurodivergent women who have spent decades in this chronic dysregulation, that communication line has been firing stress signals for a very long time. Okay. Think about that. If our brain and our gut are talking to each other, think about those signals. Think about the conversations that they've been having back and forth. Okay. Cortisol does not just make you feel anxious. It doesn't just make you gain weight. It doesn't just make you insulin resistant. It literally changes the bacterial compensation of your gut. Um, Literally. Okay. It increases that intestinal permeability, or you've probably heard this as leaky gut. Okay. Those gut junctions, those linings there, which then dump everything back into our system. Leaky gut is a huge problem. Okay. It literally reduces that diversity of that microbiome. So, like we started this with, remember in the rainforest, we need all those species of trees. It literally decreases the amount of species that we have. And for us, cortisol dysregulation is not uncommon, right? It is common. And sometimes, depending on what's going on, it can be a daily occurrence. So, this means that gut healing is not only about what we eat, it's not only about what herbs or what plan we're going to do for our gut, it's about nervous system safety. Okay. The gut brain axis. Think about this for a second. You could eat literally the perfect meal, right? It's perfect. If I looked at that, you would send a picture to me, Dr. Sarah, look at this perfect meal I'm eating. You could literally eat the perfect meal. But if that meal is eaten in a state of sympathetic activation, guess what? You don't even digest that meal correctly. Okay. You don't even digest that meal correctly. And it's all just about your brain, right? The way your brain is. And that is seriously how this goes. Okay. All right. So this is also a piece that I want to stress that if you leave here today and you're anxious about every meal, right? Or if you get this beautiful, your doctor, you get your gut analyzed and you leave that office and you have this beautiful 20-page packet of what you're going to do. Week 1, you're going to take this herb and this herb at this time and this herb. What if you were scared to eat the wrong thing? If you were scared to miss that pill or that herb, or you're scared that, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail this. Guess what? Your gut won't heal, right? You will not be able to navigate what it takes for the gut to heal. Not because you're not trying hard enough or not because you don't want to do it, but because anxiety, perfection, and fear keep your nervous system in that sympathetic activation. And we have got to be, and there's some talk about this in the zeitgeist, but it's really true. You've actually got to be in the right mindset to heal. right? And I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this, but I have. I couldn't deal, not only am I neurodivergent, but I've been to war multiple times and I had a horrible PTS from it. And I did all the things everybody told me to, but I could never get to where I needed to go. And when I finally realized that my brain, that my sympathetic system, that I couldn't heal my trauma when I was so activated. And that's the piece about this too. Sometimes as women, especially neurodivergent women, we get a plan and then we're like, we're doing this, right? We're doing this 20-fold. I'm doing everything she says, everything is right. But what we don't realize is that expecting ourselves to be perfect is actually causing us harm. Okay. What we need to do is take a deep breath and understand that healing is not linear. There's bumpy roads, and that's okay. And it should be that way. One week, everything may go well. And then the next week, like, oh my gosh, that pancreatic enzyme is terrible, right? And we may need to stop and take a break from it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually what the expectation should be. You shouldn't be given this 20-page plan and said, okay, see you in 3 months, just do everything on this paper. That's what's part of what's wrong with medicine, right? No, you should be working with someone who's like, listen, this isn't going to go perfectly. Right. And that's what I tell all my patients, right? Like, hey, this is a relationship. You're going to call me when something, goes wrong or awry, and I expect it to. Okay. Because none of this is perfect. Right. So the gut repairs, rebuilds, and rebalances. And guess what? A parasympathetic state. It makes sense, right? Rest and digest. That's what parasympathetic is, right? Rest and digest. So the gut actually heals in a parasympathetic state, right? That's the mechanism of it. So if your new protocol becomes your new stressor, then guess what? That protocol becomes a problem or it's adding to. Okay. I don't want you to eat perfectly. I want you to eat safely. Right. So, meaning in a state where your nervous system feels calm enough to actually digest what you're giving it. A nourishing meal eaten in panic, like we talked about, does a heck of a lot less than a less perfect meal, right? Eaten in peace. Okay. It seems so simple, but it's very complicated, right? And this is why we go slow. So with any one of my patients that we look, and I look at gut in almost all of my patients eventually, sometimes there's things we have to adjust first. And sometimes the gut is the first thing that we are looking at, but we have to go slow. All right. And this is why we start with what is tolerable. This is why I say everybody should work with a physician that does precision guided medicine. What does that mean? It means the medicine for you, because what works for you isn't going to be what works for me and isn't going to be what works for my friend or the 55 influencers on TikTok, right? It's got to be what works for you. Okay. So this is why there's no version of gut healing, especially that includes white knuckling your way to heal your gut. It's like, oh, I can just take one more day of these herbs. And I don't know if you've ever taken a gut protocol, but it can be pretty harsh sometimes. And we know that, right? The gut didn't get dysbiotic and permeable and all this stuff overnight. And it is one of the hardest things to heal. Can we heal it? We sure can. But it can be very difficult. And if we go into that not understanding that, right? In our neurodivergent brains, where we're going to take on the world because this is the thing that's going to make everything better for us, that can actually cause us to have worse symptoms because we can't white knuckle our way through this, right? Our nervous system actually has to be in a foundational place where we can work on this. Okay. So number 2, food rigidity is not a character flaw and it is not an obstacle to healing. Like I said a little bit ago, it is information that just requires a different approach. So if you are working with someone to heal your gut and they don't understand, if you are someone that has food aversion, if they don't understand that, get someone else. Okay. I know that's easier said than done, but it's not a character flaw. It is literally just information. So, like, for example, a lot of or some autistic women will have sensory processing differences, texture aversions. I have those too. Limited, like your safe food list is limited, right? So that's okay, right? We just use that, right? We use those safe foods and then we can supplement around that. We can augment around that. We have to make sure that you're getting what you need, but not at the expense. It's not going to work if you tell me, Dr. Sarah, I can't eat broccoli, and I tell you in your 20-page protocol, you have to eat crucifer vegetables all the time and eat broccoli. That's not going to work, right? Eating a rainbow does not work if half the rainbow makes you gag or throw up. It doesn't make sense. Increase your fiber doesn't work if the foods that contain fiber, send you into a full sensory shutdown, right? And that's so important because I've seen so many women in practice that think that they have failed because they've tried elimination diets, right? They've tried what this person said. They read this book this person said, and they couldn't do it. And they take that as a personal failure, right? Like, oh my gosh, I couldn't stick to the gut protocol. It was too hard for me. I can't do that. That's not your failure. That's a provider failure. That's that specific book failure. That's not someone looking at you as the whole person that you are with precision guidance. So when I work with someone who has food aversions, I don't start by saying what you should eat, right? We start by saying, what can you eat? What can you eat? What are the things that you eat? What feels safe to you? What doesn't cause you sensory distress? Then guess what? What do? We build around that, right? That just makes sense, right? We build around that. We fill in the gaps with supplements if we need to, right? We build around the things and make sure that we're getting what we need to do. So the moral of that story is that just make sure that you're working with someone who understands your neurodivergence because it could be another thing that just makes you feel like you're not doing the right thing when that's not the case. Okay. When even when we're talking about hormones, now we're talking about gut, but even when we're talking about HRT in the neurodivergent woman is very different than it is in any other women. Okay. It has to be taken much more slow. I use quarter doses. I mean, you have to have someone that understands that. Okay. So please do that. They understand that, right? They'll build a plan around you, right? Number 3, if your gut symptoms cycle with your hormones, right? So if you're still someone that gets a period, you're not menopausal, or you haven't had a hysterectomy or an ablation, even if you have, you can still see these cyclic gut cycles. But if that's happening, guess what? That's clinical context. If you only get bloated the week before your period, right, when we're in luteal phase, or you only have IBS symptoms the week before your period, that isn't, coincidence, right? What is happening that week before? What is estrogen's going down, progesterone's going up. What does that pathway look like? In that piece, are you not able to process those estrogens out and they're getting recycled? What does the estrobolome look like at that time? Right? What is happening? You're not, for some reason that week before you're not clearing. Sometimes this is every day for women, right? And so that tells me there's a more global problem going on. The estrobolome is not just affected by whether you're in luteal phase or follicular phase, but the estrobolome is, those are women that have a leaky gut. Okay, increased gut permeability. But what is actually really happening? Okay. And then what do you do with that information? First, you name it out loud, right? These are the symptoms that I have. This is when I have them. Does anybody know the amount of neurodivergent women that are diagnosed with IBS? It's insane. It's insane. And I don't want to say IBS is fake, but it's not fake, but it's a symptom of. Okay. It's not that IBS isn't a real thing, but just someone giving you the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome is BS. Why? Because what is causing your irritable bowel syndrome? What is it? Okay. That is the question then. Great, I have it. What is causing it and what do I do about it? Right? That's really problematic. We also need to stop treating gut symptoms in isolation, right? So if we're just managing the bloating and the cramping, but we're not looking at what's causing it. Do you know that your period should not be painful? Yes, you can have some cramping, but they should not be for us or our daughters. It should not be that we can't function. If your daughter can't go to school, if you are someone that couldn't go to school, if you have to take a day off of work because of your period, that is not normal, right? That shows me and tells me that you have elevated prostaglandins, right? Why? Because you have more inflammation. Why? Right? Is it coming from the gut? Where is this coming from? That's the questions that we need to ask because then we can actually target them. Right. And third, are you getting the right testing? So someone that gets diagnosed with IBS and has never had gut mapping is silly, right? Because that's the step. Oh, you have irritable bowel syndrome because you tell me that you have constipation and diarrhea, right? And you go back and forth between those things. But that next step is, okay, well, what does your gut microbiome look like, right? Do you have any parasites, right? What are those commensal bacteria? What is the species, right? How many species do you have? How many trees do you have, right? Going back to our rainforest. So you have to have gut mapping. That's the only way to look at it. Also, if you're having a lot of hormonal symptoms, we got to see what your beta glucuronidase levels are. Is that estrobolome actually processing the estrogen out of the body? Or is it recycling it, right? And causing more issues, right? Recycling that estrogen that we don't want, that's now inflammatory and causing more problems. So we need to be able to look at that. Um, we have to do that. Also, I know sometimes for us tracking can also feel like a pressure. So I say light and easy. I say if you feel a symptom and you want to, you can do it on your phone, you can do it in a notebook. Just keep track. Tracking is really important because then if you're working whoever you're working with, you can say, look at here's my symptoms, look at that. And I typically can look at that and be like, oh yeah, okay. This is luteal. I bet you her I've seen enough of this where I can kind of tell what I think that the stool samples or study is going to show us. And most of the time I'm right. Sometimes I'm surprised, but most of the time I'm right. But tracking is really helpful. Again, if it doesn't make you if it doesn't make you feel, a crazy. Hold on, I'm going to read Renee's. I had IBS symptoms for years and they disappeared when I left the job I was in and also started exercising. Yeah, you're right. And so I don't know if you were here when we first started, but we talked about in the neurodivergent woman, in neurodivergence in general, men and women actually in this regard. But it's because a lot of times we are stuck in that chronic fight or flight and that dysregulates the gut, right? Because there's a gut brain axis. So your IBS symptoms were probably throwing off your gut because you were so chronically stressed at this job or you were in fight or flight so much. So you took away that stimulus that created you in fight or flight and then your gut symptoms got better. We see that all the time, right? We see it both ways. We see if we look at the gut and we start healing the gut, the brain symptoms get better, the depression, the anxiety, ADHD symptoms, right? That are kind of out of control. Like those get better. And we see the reverse is true. If we're able to take down the chronic stress, if we're able to get better sleep, right? Then we actually see the gut symptoms get better. So yeah, Renee, that makes complete sense. And also you're mentioning exercising and things which we know, what do they do? It increases serotonin and dopamine. And also guess what it does? Increases the species of microbiome in our gut. Exercise is so powerful. Exercise actually upregulates beta glucuronidase, right, which processes estrogen out of the body, out of the gut. It does other things in the gut too. So it makes complete sense that that would get better. Remember, gut brain axis. So both of those things can work, and we can see that. Okay, I do want to share some cases. I think this is really helpful. Just like with Renee's, I think it's really helpful to hear stories of real women. Of course, there's no, descriptors on here. You don't know who they are, but these are real. There are a couple of different patterns, and I just kind of wanted to highlight those in case anybody falls into them. And these are patterns that I've seen a lot, not just once. They're not one-offs, right? These are patterns I see kind of over and over and over again. And so, okay, the first one is Maya. These are fake names, right? Protect the people. Maya, she was 38 when she came to me. She had ADHD diagnosis, and she was 34, I think, when she got diagnosed. And she was on a stimulant medicine, which I won't say the name. She came to me because despite being on all this stuff, she just felt like her ADHD medicine hadn't stopped working. And she felt like it was kind of all of a sudden. She said, I know something is wrong. I just don't really know what. I just know something is. And she felt like every month she fell off a cliff around day 20, which is really typical, right? And if you've done our biology of the neurodivergent brain, you know why that is, right? And of course, she had told multiple doctors about that, her psychiatrist who was prescribing her the stimulant. And they just kept saying, okay, well, you need different dosing. You need a dose adjustment. And she was dealing with severe bloating, constipation. Had this IBS picture, constipation, and sometimes it was diarrhea. And then she also described severe PMDD. So she would say that I think for her it was 7 or 8 days before her complete collapse though. Can't get out of bed, what I call very, very severe PMDD. She also started to she was believing that and feeling like this was actually getting worse. She was like, "My meds aren't working. Nothing is working. Everything is getting worse." Okay, so we did a lot of things. I don't just focus on the gut, right? As an integrative medicine doctor, I look at everything, and we look at cellular injury. We look at all this stuff. Well, this is gut, so we're going to focus on that. We did do a gut mapping because of her symptoms, and one of the things, there was other things, but one of the things that showed is she had very, very elevated beta glucuronidase, right? And that, like we talked about, that's the enzyme that reactivates estrogen in the gut. So guess what? She wasn't wrong. Her PMDD symptoms were worse, right? Why? Because her estrobolome was not doing well and she was recycling that bad estrogen and it was more inflammatory, right? And all of these things. She also had MTHFR gene mutation, which a lot of people have, but it means her methylation pathway is also a little bit, inhibited, and estrogen clearance depends on that to a certain degree too. So she had all of these things going on. So from a gut aspect, we focused on things like we reduced her beta glucuronidase. We gave her methylated B vitamins. We did some other things, but we focused on exactly what was going on with her, right? Not a guess what was going on with her. And I'd always hand in hand with any of these things we do, we target the nervous system, right? So she was doing red light. She was doing some sauna stuff. She was doing ExoMind, right? We focused on the nervous system as well. I actually created this protocol for her around meal times, right? That she would do to get out from sympathetic to parasympathetic before she would eat every single meal. Within 3 cycles, so 3 months, she reported that her luteal phases were about 60% less severe. And remember, we didn't change any of her medication. We kept her on the same stimulant. We kept her on everything that she was on. We just worked on the gut and the nervous system. 60% better. 60% better. That's insane. Right? And guess what? It ebbs and flows, right? I don't want you to think, and there's nothing, I'm the kind of physician that tells you how it is, whether I like it or you like it, but this is an ebb and flow. Healing is not linear. And it never should be. Again, in society, it's like, okay, do this and it's healed. It's not like that. We're going to have really good months and then we're going to have not so good months. And we have to be able to be given the tools and the understanding of how that is. Okay? And in the end, she actually didn't need to go up on her ADHD medication. We really just needed to look at her system as a whole. And after we worked on gut, we worked on some other cellular things, some mitochondrial things, some other things to give her some cellular capacity back, increase her ATP naturally, right? And actually, 6 months after that, we were able to start coming down off of her stimulant. So that was really good. Rosa, 44. Renee, I will read yours right after Rosa because you're the real life in here. Rosa, she was 44 when she came to me. She had a late autism diagnosis, lifelong GI issues, she told me. She goes, ever since I can remember. And my labs are always normal. That's what she said. Well, I don't know if that drives me so crazy, but so she'd been dismissed for years, basically. Anxiety related IBS. She actually sent me her medical records, and I actually counted in the course of 6 years, I counted 28 or 29 times where it said anxiety related IBS. 28 or 29 times. Okay. And she never has ever had a GI workup. She did have a colonoscopy and stuff, but she never had like gut mapping. Nobody ever looked at that. Nobody even looked at her cellular capacity. Guess what? She was also perimenopausal, right? So that added on. It was very symptomatic from that. So that added on things. But again, right before her appointment with me, she saw her primary. He said, your estrogen is fine. Your estrogen is fine. Okay. Okay, great. So her serum estradiol was normal. Duh. We know that doesn't mean anything, but nobody looked at the gut. Nobody looked at the estrobolome. Nobody looked at how she was metabolizing the estrogen, right? And those are two totally different things. One's a numeric number, which essentially is useless. except for your estrogen does have to be above a certain degree for bone protection. Other than that, it's a useless number, to be honest with you. Nobody looked at the functionality side, right? How is that estrobolome working? How is she detoxing the estrogen? Um, and guess what? When we looked at that, she wasn't clearing her estrogen from her gut. She was recycling it, which was making her more inflammatory. Her mitochondria were really jacked up. And guess what? For her, she had severe sensory food restrictions. She had a lot. She had basically 12 safe foods that she could eat. And she had tried, she read the book, she did all the right things. She tried elimination diets before. She failed them. She told me, she was like, I can get to about week 2 and that's it. Right. And it's like, yeah, because that's not made for you. That's just generalization put out there. So guess what? I did not, I did not touch her safe food list, right? These are the 12 foods you can eat. I built her plan around that, right? We kept her list safe and I built her plan around it. I gave her some things, optimized the gut. And also guess what? She had been in, like everyone else, you, me, everyone, she'd been in sympathetic dominance, or I call it the sympathetic spiral of doom, almost her entire life. And nobody talked to her about that, right? Nobody talked to her about what being so sympathetic for so long does to you and does to your symptom. Okay. Your system and your symptoms. 6 months later, cyclic breast tenderness is gone. Brain fog was significantly reduced. She told me, I finally feel like I found the missing piece that nobody was looking for. So, yay, she wasn't missing willpower, right? She was missing the information to look at everything. Okay, Renee. I'm probably still too much chronic fight or flight. Yes. I exercise daily. Okay, good. Gained 10 pounds that I couldn't seem to lose. Off a cliff after training. Yes, that's right. Clockwork, that cycle falls off a cliff after 50. You're on HRT, which helps, but constantly bloating, can't seem to shed ththese pounds. For reference, I'm in 30 gram. Oh, all right. Okay. As you know, I can't give you medical advice, but I will ask you, and you can answer this in here. So I thought you said something about detox. I do elimination patterns are very normal and on schedule. Okay, I get that. Have you ever had gut testing? Right? Have you ever had actual gut testing? And here's the other thing. This brings up a really good point. So I'm happy that you brought it up. HRT is a wonderful and powerful tool, but this is what I try to get across, especially from the neurodivergent lens. It is not the end all be all, right? My logo you'll see back here is a circle, and it's that way for a reason because HRT, although very powerful, is only one tool. You brought a great point. If you're still in chronic fight or flight, you're still in that sympathetic spiral of doom, no dose of HRT, no peptide, no dose of stimulant, right? You're on Adderall is ever going to be able to overcome that. We have to pull these little levers. Okay, we have HRT. Okay, great. Estrogen's going to give back some of that prefrontal cortex, right? Give us back some of that that we need in our prefrontal cortex, especially if you're on estrogen and you're on testosterone, right? Okay, our Adderall is going to kind of help maintain. But what you're telling me in your picture alone, right, without even looking at your gut, is that you still have these inflammatory pathways that are going on. If you've gained weight, you can't get it off. If you're still in that sympathetic spiral of doom, your cellular capacity isn't where it needs to be. And probably your gut health is too. So I would recommend that. That might be a really good place to start in working with someone who understands what that looks like from a neurodivergence standpoint, because it could give you some really good information. But there's quite a few things you could tweak. What are you also doing to decrease your sympathetic spiral of doom, right? What are you doing? Because that could be helpful too. All right, Beth, I heard you mention some ideas for supporting this program later. Um, Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Nervous system state. Yeah. Okay. So here's some easy ones. And I actually can, what I'll do is I'll give you a little handout that I have. I'll put it in the paid subscribers chat after this so you guys can have it. But some of the easier things to do to deactivate yourself from sympathetic to parasympathetic, I'll just talk about really the things you can do that don't involve medication, because there's different ways that I do that. I use methylene blue. I use all these different types of things to help mitochondrial health, because the more cellular capacity you have, the better. But for example, and I'll give you, since we're talking about gut, I'll give you an example of the protocols I have people on, like, prior to eating, would be very simple as breathing, right? Breathing exercises, and you can actually do this right now. You've probably done it before, but when you do a four-step, breath series, I always, like, feel myself right now, like, "Okay, how do I feel? Where am I at?" Then you in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, repeat for 4. That is what I'll have them do right before, um, eating, or I actually do it 3 times a day just because I'm also very sympathetic, right? And just to, even if I don't feel stressed, just to take myself down, right? Some people, that can be yoga. What I will also offer you is sauna is extremely good for the neurodivergent brain, twice a week or so. It also helps clear up the detox pathways, right? Remember, detoxification is a big problem for our neurodivergence because we already don't like change, right? So what is the issue, right? With dopamine, we can't access it well and all of these different things. And then enter in when you have gut problems, enter in when you have cortisol levels so high because you are always so stressed. A red light is another thing, super easy thing that you can get and put on you. Another thing, actually, deactivation. People will always talk about ice, like ice baths. Ice baths are there's a lot of good to them, but they're actually not really great for women, to be honest with you. Some women love them, but they're not great. They can actually make us have more sympathetic drive. But do you know what? Something warm doesn't, right? So I'll have, sometimes I have some of my patients like in between meetings, or like when they're about to go into a really big meeting, I'll actually have them throw a heating pack on the back of their neck right here. Those ones that go on your neck, just for 3 minutes, and do the 4 by 4 breath with the heating pad on. Throw the heating pad off, boom, out the door you go. So there's a lot of things you can do, and I'll put some more specific ones in the chat. I'll put it in the Substack a group message just for you guys so you can see it. And then how would I find a doctor for that? Yeah, that's a great question. I get a question. I get a lot of questions. What I would say is that you have to ask the right questions. It's hard to find physicians that really truly understand neurodivergence. There's a lot in psychiatry, right? But there's not a lot of us in general medicine or integrative medicine. They understand a lot of things, but not a lot of people or physicians understand the neurodivergent brain, especially women, neurodivergent women, because we're very unique and we're awesome, but we are unique. So I would say that, and I can also put this in the chat, that there's specific questions that you should ask to find a doctor. You can go anywhere and find a functional medicine or integrative medicine doctor that can actually look at the stool. That's not even a problem. You can find that on every corner for, that matter. But finding someone who actually understands how to interpret that and how to interpret neurodivergence, that's really the piece that we really need that connection because, we're not talking about HRT here, but this is the same is true for the gut protocols, which is that we don't process things the same, right? And so this is the same with HRT, right? I do not put there is no pattern or there's no standard like, oh, this is why I practice precision guided medicine because I can put you, Renee, on something and I can put Beth on something, same dose, same everything, even if it's a small dose and you'll both react differently. And so my neurodivergent ladies, I have to start even smaller doses sometimes. Sometimes we have to skip things. Sometimes we have to go different. So I say all of that to say that it really is important that you find someone, physician, provider that understands neurodivergence as well. Right. You have to understand the gut piece. That part's easy. There's lots of people that understand the gut, but they have to understand it in the neurodivergent brain because that brings a little bit more of a twist to it. I hope that helps. And I will send you guys those things too. All right. Jamie. So she's my next patient. She's 26, ADHD, and well, she was 26 when she came to me. ADHD, PMDD. She was started on SSRIs at 19 and then hormonal contraception at 21 for the PMDD. I want to talk about Jamie because this case is something I see over and over and over. And by the way, they get younger and younger and younger. Okay. My youngest PMDD teen right now is 16. And the only reason she's seeing me, which is so great because I can stop all of these other things from happening, is because her mom is my patient. Right. And her mom's like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing this in my daughter. And I'm like, okay, Well, let's get on top of that. And we are, and it's good. But I bring her case up because over time and time and time and time again. So she came to me because of her mom, right? And she said, her mom said, "She's telling me that all of these things are off. I don't know. I think she's kind of okay." I was like, "Well, just bring her here." And she told me that she hadn't been feeling like herself for years. Her hair was falling out, her libido was 0, her mood was flat. She said, "I Dr. Sarah, I'm not depressed, but I feel like this." This is exactly her mechanism. "I feel like this." Right? I feel like that. And she said that everyone around her thought she was fine, even her mom did. She when at 19, she was told she was too emotional, and she went to her primary, and guess what they did? They put her on an SSRI. At 21, her PMDD symptoms were breaking through, and she was having a tough time, so they put her on hormonal contraception, birth control. The PMDD, she told me, got maybe 10% better, but she thought that was kinda life, like, okay. Guess what? Nobody looked at her testosterone. And actually, this week we're talking all about testosterone. Not once. Nobody looked at it at baseline. Nobody looked at it after they started her on birth control. Nobody looked at it at all, right? And until she came to me at 28, guess what? Her testosterone was crap. It was 4, I believe. Right? Birth control increased her sex hormone binding globulin, which ate up all her free testosterone, and it wasn't available, right? And so guess what? Um, Remember what that prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is where all of our executive functioning is, what it relies on, testosterone. No wonder why she was having horrible PMDD, right? No wonder why she felt like she had no executive functioning, because they took that from her, right, when they gave her synthetic hormones. Okay? And I'm not saying birth control is wrong for everybody. It's not. But birth control and SSRIs have a place, but they should not be a blanket statement to not look at anyone else or to look at any other thing. Okay? And that's what's happening to them. And that's probably could be what happened to you. It's also what happened to me, which is why we're on this journey, right? Because we're going to create generational change. We're not going to let this happen. So guess what? Also, testosterone affects the gut, right? And her gut microbiome was very dysbiotic, right? Her estrobolome wasn't functioning. This was all this piece. But rebuilding her microbiome was part of her recovery. But the most important thing that happened was that um, I really just gave her the light that she was really just under supported, right? Nobody had looked at testosterone, and we gave her back testosterone, right? We took her off birth control. We were eventually able to take her off an SSRI after doing a whole bunch of things. I don't want to make this seem like this is easy, because it isn't, right? This is work, and this is months and months and months of work, but it's possible, right? We don't have to be on these things. We don't have to be in disarray when we're looking at what is the cause. Her healing was slow, it wasn't linear, and it included real grief, right? Grief is part of the conversation, you guys. I just read somewhere on Substack today. I could find it, I guess, because I think I restacked it, where it was I thought it was like so important. Let me see if I can see my restack. Sorry. Um, oh, come on. I'm not going to be able to find it now. But it was so amazing. It said something to the effect of like, grief and this should be a part of our healing, be a part of our business plan. Um, and that is so true, right? And so when you work with someone or when you find a new diagnosis, really part of that plan, that treatment plan, right? Just like your business plan should be, hey, this is going to be a bumpy road. I already expect that. What am I going to do when we hit the first bump? What are we going to do when we hit the second bump? Right? Because none of these protocols or none of this is going to work if we're not able to get our mind right. Okay, let's see. Renee says you do breath work. That's very good. Okay. What specialty deals with the gut? So really what I would say, no, GI doctors, unless they're an integrative GI doctor, not really, right? They really work with, they're more of the traditional medicine piece, which is, do you need a colonoscopy, an endoscopy, take a PPI, unless they're an integrative GI, right? Integrative GI will take a look, but functional medicine is actually probably where it's at, is that you can get your gut mapping, start there, kind of see what's going on, what's happening in there. Yeah, your doctor should be testing your testosterone. There's no reason not to. Like, what are they doing? Why do they care? And it sounds like you need a new doctor, honestly. You need the whole system looked at. Testosterone is a huge piece, especially in neurodivergence. And we're getting into that this week. Both articles this week, tomorrow and Wednesday, are all about testosterone. So you'll be happy to see that. Then Renee, you can take that little snidbit to your doctor and let him or her know why they should be testing your testosterone, right? Okay. I want to end with this. Okay. So if you take nothing else from today, let this be the one thing. Your neurodivergent diagnosis is not a new thing to optimize. Your gut protocol, right, is not a new thing to optimize, right? Healing is not a performance, right? And it doesn't need to look like anyone else's. And it really shouldn't, right? It doesn't have to be fast. And most of the time it isn't. Okay. And it doesn't have to be linear. And it's not linear. I've treated thousands of women, hundreds and hundreds of neurodivergent women, and healing is never linear. And when we understand that and we work together, that's where real magic occurs, right? You give yourself grace and I give you the guidance, right? And that's what we should be looking for. So again, when you do get your gut test, Renee, please don't look at that 20-page protocol and say, oh gosh, like I have to be perfect. I have to eat this way. I have to do that. No. Okay. Take a deep breath and let's figure out how to get ourselves in the right headspace and what can we do and how are we going to move forward. Right. So, because honestly, no matter where we heal from, it has to be yours. It has to be sustainable. Right. It has to be kind and it has to be built around what your body actually needs. Right. This is kind of funny, but it's like not what the wellness industry tells you should want, right? Not what TikTok tells you it should be. Okay. You have a nervous system. We have a nervous system that's been working harder than it should have for longer than it should have with less support than it deserved. Okay. That changes when we start bringing information into the system instead of blame. All right. I'm going to send you, um, talk about grief. Yeah. And that is huge. The grief piece is huge. And I'll put it in the chat too. I did do a YouTube about grief and the things no one told us about our late diagnosis, um, and how there are stages of grief to that and what to do, and that it's completely okay. So I'll put that in there for you too, Renee. You should check it out. It's I think it's 50 minutes. It's a master class that I did about grief and having a new diagnosis. Um, but it's pretty powerful. So I'm going to send that. And then, like I said, it's all about testosterone this week. So make sure you check it out Monday and Wednesday. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Happy Sunday. Thanks for choosing to be on this journey with me and deciding that your health is worth investing in. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions, anything, and I will see you all tomorrow.